Your team about to go down in North Carolina.
That was perfect contact, a nice feed. It's willing to make that perfect contact. Takes that shot with the left. Now leading 9-0. There it is. Game over. 12-0 Wrexham defeats the U.S. women.
Tell me again why women deserve the same pay as men. Bro, what was that chick thinking? That was brutal.
The principle you think that women should get paid the same, even if they're not as technically as good and not producing as much revenue.
Well, it's a subjective judgment, isn't it, on whether or not they're like technically as good?
Well, not really.
It's a subjective judgment.
Subjective judgment? Typically you're either the strongest, fastest, or score the most points. Now, as far as sports where you get graded based on technique or form, I can sort of see where you're coming from, but for the most part, it's pretty straightforward.
28 members of the U.S. women's national soccer team filing a gender discrimination lawsuit against the U.S. Soccer Federation.
We know in our hearts, and we know with the facts that we have that we're on the right side of it.
And now the men who earn the majority, 97% of the revenue, they have to now split it equally with the women's team who only are earning 2.5% of what the men are making. And this, they want you to believe, is equal pay.
I don't think anybody can argue that there's gender inequities in this world, that there's a pay gap, that there's pay discrepancy.
Actually, the intelligent female athletes of the world will make that argument.
Floyd Mayweather fight, they're walking away with, hundreds of millions of dollars at stake. You being at the height of your sport, maybe make what, $1 million at most per fight? Does that anger you?
What seems to anger her based on her body language is you trying to recruit her for this fight for a non-problem that she knows doesn't truly exist. And the most ridiculous part about this clip and this woman is that in her attempt to use Ronda Rousey for her own personal agenda, she's actually insulting her.
I don't like to talk about exactly how much money I make, but I'm extremely comfortable and happy. You are? Yes. Okay, so. And, if I got to a point where I had almost 50 fights, I would probably be making close to the same amount of money that Floyd does. But at this point, I have 11. So I can't expect it to be exactly equal yet. I have to put more time in.
Finally, a female athlete who actually understands how this all works and doesn't just base her opinion on how she feels about the situation.
But I feel like boys have it easier. Like in the world, they have it so much easier.
And there's that phrase again, I feel like. Why is nothing about reality with these people and everything is just based on feelings?
Think about how much NBA players get paid compared to WNBA players.
You know why?
Because like people are nicer to men than women.
No way does this woman actually believe this. And if she truly does, then this is exactly why social media, or just the regular media in general, is destroying society. Too many people with a voice just spreading ridiculous ideas that are absolutely not based in reality whatsoever.
Now, if they make it to the final, the girls will get $5,500 each. The blokes will get $69,000 each. How can anyone justify this item? They can't. No.
Sure they can.
Because if you look at the revenue, for example, in 2019, FIFA generated £586 million in total revenue. The men's for the 2019-22 cycle, 5.8 billion. Record revenue through the Men's World Cup. So
it sounds like Piers justified it pretty well in about 5 seconds.
Sport doesn't become interesting because the stars are paid more money. Stars get paid more money because the sport is interesting. All of you can go and watch W League games in the women's competition here, but you don't. Now, when you start to go and watch these women play the wonderful football they do, then they'll earn more money.
Yeah, this is another thing I find interesting about the people who complain about this so-called gender pay gap and the lack of interest in these leagues. They don't want to watch these games, but they want to get mad at sports fans who have just as little interest in watching them as they themselves do. Why is it up to men and sports fans to support these boring leagues when the people making all these complaints could easily support them themselves by actually watching? That would help them create the revenue to increase these female athletes' earnings, but they'd rather just spend their time complaining about men and the patriarchy.
I'll say this, the whole reason a lot of us go over, is the pay gap. It's the pay gap. You know, a lot of us go over there to make an income to support our families. And as much as I would love to, you know, pay my light bill for the love of the game, I can't, you know.
Hold up. You can't pay your electric bill with a $220,000 salary here in America. I mean, don't get me wrong, I can't blame you if you want to go to Russia to try to earn more, but let's not pretend that you're playing for peanuts over here in the States and that a wage gap is your problem when it's pretty obvious why you're getting paid less than men.
The men's team makes more money. If they make more money, then they should get more money.
Why does the men's team?
The men's team makes more money because because people are more interested.
Exactly. Finally, Don Lemon says something with which I can actually agree.
Why are people more interested in the men's sports? Because it's
it's more interesting to watch.
And again, if anybody wants to blame men for why these leagues have such poor viewership and you want things to change, then the change can start with you. I mean, Brittany Griner has the audacity to blame the wage gap for her problems when people didn't even show up for her first game back after being locked up for months, and she's now arguably the most famous person in the WNBA.
Come on, LA. Like, we didn't sell out the arena for BG. Like, I expected more, you know, to be honest, right? Like, it was great, it was loud, but how was it not a sellout?
This is how.
People are trying to make a big deal out of Brittany Griner's dunk in the All-Star game, and let's just ignore the fact that this would be the least exciting dunk ever seen in a men's JV game. But this is super irresponsible of her, because don't you think you'd stay away from traveling like this after everything she's experienced?
Actually, after that clip, maybe there's some truth to what they say about women not being treated the same in sports. I mean, Brittany just traveled halfway around the world before that beautiful dunk and didn't even suffer a penalty. I can't believe people aren't just thrilled to watch this incredible display of athleticism.
The average WNBA player makes $79,000, while their counter.
Oh, look at my man. Change of direction by Bryant.
Nice, huh?
3-on-1 off the backboard. You got away with an illegal screen on Turner. Howard.
Bro, the look on that guy's face. But again, is this woman really trying to pretend that she's ever actually watched a WNBA game or supported these women in any real way? Perhaps I'm wrong here, but I've got a hunch that she's just looking for more reasons to complain about men. I mean, aren't men doing enough? They're already subsidizing these leagues and allowing these women the opportunity to play the sport they love professionally. What more do they want?
We are not asking to get paid what the men get paid. We're asking to get paid the same percentage of revenue. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, well, if that's the case,
If I were you, I wouldn't go down that road.
The WNBA players are actually paid more than the NBA players when you take into consideration the total revenue of their respective leagues. See, these are the numbers that everybody's stuck on. The NBA players bringing home $5.3 million a year, while the WNBA players bring home on average $130,000 a year. If you look at this surface level, then you won't understand the discrepancy between the two numbers, but let's dig into it a little bit more. When we see that the NBA has a revenue of $10 billion and the WNBA has a revenue of $50 million, it starts to become crystal clear as to why that discrepancy exists. But that still doesn't explain how I said that the WNBA players are making almost 4 times more. So what I'm going to do is show you how much of the total revenue of the league that the women are bringing home and the total revenue of the league that the men are bringing home. And you see that the women are actually making more than what the men are making in terms of the total revenue of their leagues. Here's the WNBA's average salary. Here's their league total, and you get 0.22%. Here's the NBA's average salary. Here's their league total. You get 0.057%. And when we do that math, we see that the women are paid 3.9 times more than what the men are being paid. Wasn't hard. And I wasn't even taking into consideration how the WNBA is a totally failed organization. It doesn't produce a profit, and it's 100% subsidized by the NBA. But that's a conversation for another day.
I mean, the fact that these leagues are being subsidized, yet the players are still complaining that they're not earning enough, not to mention the fact that the men are playing more games than the women. This is like a company with a sales team where the women only showed up 3 days a week, barely sold anything, and then the men, who sold pretty much everything, had to share their earnings with the women, only to have them complain that they're not getting half.
I just tell the truth, and telling the truth is crazy in a world full of lies.
So it says, women complaining about a gender pay gap in sports is like men complaining about a gender pay gap on OF.
I mean, I don't know if that's true about OnlyFans, because there are a lot of men on OnlyFans as well. But I mean...
You don't know if it's true. I mean, just because there are a bunch of guys on OF doesn't mean they're necessarily making the same amount as women. There are a bunch of women in sports, but the whole point of this debate is the fact that even though there are men and women in sports, the women don't make as much as the men. So how does the fact that a bunch of men are on that platform make any sense to this argument? The point is that the team, person, or league that has the largest fan base or performs the best, brings in the most revenue, and therefore earns the most. But you don't hear many men or women for that matter complaining about the discrepancy in pay between the genders when it comes to the adult film or modeling industry. I wonder why that is. Maybe because to complain about it wouldn't benefit women. Because the goal of feminism isn't actually to achieve equality between the two genders as they claim. It's to gain as many privileges as possible for one of them and deny that they exist. Otherwise, what would they have to complain about then?
Why do you think women are paid less than men?
Depends. Let's say for football, I'm just being honest, women aren't as skilled as men are in football, so less people will watch it and less people will buy tickets, which is how footballers make their money.
How is this 10-year-old boy smarter than everyone complaining about the wage gap throughout this entire video? And you know the feminists are really getting to the kids these days, because even his little buddy there is looking at him when he said that, knowing he's right, like, oh boy, you effed up spreading some truth like that.
A woman a couple months back, professional soccer player, right? She goes on to ESPN or one of these sports channels, and she starts going like, I don't understand, how come female athletes don't make as much as male professional athletes? And all of these men had to sit there and act like they didn't know what the answer was. They had to sit there like dumbfounded, like, why is that? Literally, I'm sitting at home screaming at the TV because you don't sell any tickets! Nobody is going to women's soccer games! I'm not saying no professional female athletes, Serena Williams, the women in the UFC, you know? But nobody's watching your sport. And then you're gonna come and you're gonna get mad at men. They keep doing that. Why are you yelling at us? It's not our job. It's not my job to give a about women's soccer.
Bro, Bill Burr is absolutely on point with this, and I love how the people complaining about these non-issues will continue arguing and coming up with new points regardless of how logical your explanation or any of the facts you present to them on this topic. Women don't get fair equal pay. Well, that's because they generate less revenue. That's just because the patriarchy doesn't want to promote them as much as the men. Well, that's because if they did, people probably still won't watch and they'd lose even more money. That's just because men have always been sexist pigs who don't want to give women a fair chance. But women don't watch either. Internalized misogyny. Okay, we're done here. But that's all I gotta say for this video, so click like and make sure you share your opinion down in the comments, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this video with someone you think might want to see it. Also, make sure to check out my second channel for commentary on interesting and wild relationship stories and people seeking relationship and dating advice. Till then, hope you all take care of yourselves, support and be good to good women. Peace.